Welcome, everybody. We are here for our next installment of Xenos Crossing, the competitive-minded podcast where we talk about all things on the tabletop in 40k, ranging from meta-analysis to things that we think are relevant in the 40k universe. I've got a couple guests with us here today. I've got Logan Heath. He's last year's SoCal Open champion, top 100 player. Glad to have you, Logan.
Thanks.
And I got Junior over here as well. Junior's always a consistent top 100 player, plays for Team Zero Comp, very, very high level player. Glad to have you, Junior.
Thanks.
Big news today on the competitive front. We've got the release of the data slate, the GW's living document that balances everything as we know it. There's some hot takes we want to talk about today. And then we also kind of want to deep dive into a couple other things that we think are relevant in how we're playing and how we play in our local meta. And a lot of the things that we think are going to pop up and be the things that are super significant. So we're going to jump into some of those things. So why don't we get into it? Let me introduce you guys. Logan, tell us a little bit about yourself and the current faction you're playing and from there.
So I've been playing Warhammer since 3rd edition, right before Tau and Necrons got their first official codex. And just fell in love with shooting armies. And so every edition, every new codex release, I'm always looking for, okay, what am I going to have the most fun shooting with? So right now, I guess I'm leaning towards Tau. I'm still trying to figure it out. There's a lot to chew through. But yeah, right now I'm feeling Tau.
Nice. And I think that's one of the ones that we feel like kind of rose to the top and is still stayed supremely relevant moving through all of this stuff in the current state of the game. I'm with you on that one. I feel like that's a good choice. And Junior, let's pass it over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're kind of playing, what you were playing before, what you're feeling like is going to be relevant moving forward, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Junior. Been playing Warhammer since 2nd edition. First army was actually Drukhari. When they first came out, and then Blood Angels. And that's actually the two factions that I play. I'm more of a melee-oriented person. I like to get in there and slap you. And with the new data slate, I think I'm going to try out Blood Angels again.
Yes.
I still think Drukhari is pretty strong. The things that Drukhari were pretty bad against, like Custodes, they had a little difficult time. It'll be a little bit easier. So,
right.
But I'm gonna look at Blood Angels again.
Exciting. I'm actually really excited about that. We know a little caveat for the audience, if you guys didn't know, last year's ITC season, Junior was the #1 ranked Blood Angels player in the world. He held that title down through pretty much without competition through the whole season. It got pretty close towards the end there, but I think that was a pretty decisive victory. So solid on that.
Thank you.
But yeah, so we're gonna get into it. Just a couple things for you guys as we talk about it. Most of the stuff we talk about here is both broad strokes, what we see across the GT scape, as well as what's really applicable in our local meta as well. So as we talk about some stuff, if something seems a little abstract to you, it might be a little more relevant here than it is somewhere else. And that's just because what we see all the time. Once again, this is kind of like diving into what we see as how it applies and what we kind of use to kind of propel ourselves into our standings as far as both localized tournaments and broad-based stuff. But I'm going to get right into it. So we've got the data slate here. We're going to jump through a couple of the big hot takes and let's just kind of roll down. We'll give our thoughts on them and then talk over to some of the key units that kind of they apply to and the stuff that we can pops into our heads that we think is going to be the most exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Balanced data slate, Q2, 2022, guys. All right, so we got this living document. So the first big one, this one's caused a lot of buzz. No one's going to be a stranger to it. We're not going to talk like you guys haven't read this yourself, but it's Armor of Contempt. So Armor of Contempt is a massive, massive shift in the game state because what it does is anything that has power armor essentially reduces AP by 1 for any weapon that they take damage from. There's a couple exemptions here. I'm going to read this verbatim. This rule does not apply to the following. Models equipped with a Storm Shield, a Relic Shield, or a Combat Shield. The Relic Shield replaces one of these shields. The next bullet point is models with either the Sacrosanct Shield or Force Shielding ability. Some examples are Celestian Sacrosancts and the Nemesis Dread Knights. And the last bullet is models under the effects of any other rule that worsens the armor penetration characteristics of an attack. So massive implications here. Anything with power armor just went up. Their stock just went up huge. Let's talk about that, how it applies. We definitely know there's some mathematical implications here. Let's talk about those things because that matters a lot in how we look at what's competitive. So I'll start with you, Logan. What are your thoughts on that? What are some of the things that kind of that's going to affect, and what do we think that's going to like bring up to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, kind of talked about this before we started recording, but like when you have a 2+ save and you add this on top of it, it like that really skews the math much more so than a 3-up armor.
What do you mean? So for our viewers that might not know that, let's explain the mathematical discussion there. Do you have any sort of like, what's the statistics on that? Do you know?
No, I haven't really, calculated it out, but just thinking about like you're at a 2-up save and you get hit with this AP1 weapon. Okay, well, I'm still at a 2-up. And then you go, okay, most weapons in the game have at least some AP, right? So AP1 is super relevant, super common. Then you have AP2, 3, 4, and all that. So when you look at an AP2 gun now shooting at it, all right, now your 2-up goes to a 3-up. That you're still saving most of your saves.
Right.
So AP2, you're expecting to really just start tearing through infantry, but you're not really going to do that much here. You were expecting it to be putting them on a 4-up save, and now it's a 3-up. So like on a D6-sided die, every pip is 17%, right? So you skewing the math is just giving you that extra 17% effectiveness. Also,
it's a big chunk. Yeah.
You consider player place terrain. We play a lot of that. Also GW terrain, just like you're going to have light cover for your infantry. So a lot of times your 2-up is really a 1-up save, and you ignore you bring everything down in AP. Right. So it's like almost a virtual 0+ save. And that is really annoying to dig out.
And you didn't do anything.
Yeah, you're just getting it. So now you need an AP3 gun to worsen their save to get them off of that 2-up. And AP3 isn't that prevalent. No. And now you need AP4 to really start hurting them and putting them back where they would have been with just a normal storm shield. And AP4, like even though the AP in this game has started to go, kind of crazy, it's more around AP2 and 3 that is so common. AP4 and 5 and up, that's still, not super common. I think a lot of the new books have access to that, but what you see most of, the volume that you're going to see is in that 2 to 3 range.
Right.
And this really tones that down to where now Marines on a 2-up save are surviving most of that shooting, when before they were being put to a 4-up or 5-up where they were surviving half or not the majority. Right. Right. So on a 6-sided die, just all these things stack up, and it really skews things. And from my shooting point of view, like that, so that's all the AP in my head, that I'm just thinking about all these guns that are 1, 2, and 3. That's always my perspective. It's like, wow, basically, I don't want to really be paying points for the AP2 and 3 guns now. I either want 0 and just a bunch of shots, or I want AP4 and up. And so that's why I look at things like Tau, where it's like, okay, I can have a ton of burst cannons on a Cold Star, 30 shots re-rolling everything, great, that's volume. Or I want plasma guns. And not a whole lot in between. I still put some, but not a lot. I either want ton of volume shooting or the really high quality stuff.
Yeah, and I think that, dude, it's crazy when you break it down, right? The amount of percentages, the statistical gain for nothing to really be done there is ludicrous. That's amazing. You're going to see some other data sheet stuff pull into the fold too, like some of the stuff we were talking about, like Centurions are a unit that was pretty much not anywhere near competitive play. But since we're talking about these 2-up save things, now people can look at that and be like, does this fit now? Maybe. Does it have a place? insane, and I love that because it pulls other things into the fold, shakes up the meta so much, specifically Junior, I want to ask you, so let's talk about some units with Armor of Contempt that are going to get these saves. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? I mean, so you're main in Blood Angels, you've got a lot of Marine experience. What are some units you can think that are really going to gain a lot of benefit from this? What are some of the things that you think that maybe weren't viable that could be viable now? Like, let's just talk about like Marine units, power armor units that can be brought in the fold, and like let's talk about like what you feel is like what you're looking at, what you think, where your mind goes when we get this crazy kind of thing going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So Blood Angels, Sandguard. Oh my God, they had a 2-up save already. They were competing with Vanguard vets. A lot of people were like, okay, I'm gonna take Vanguard vets because of the Storm Shield. Now I get a 2-up save with that. Well, throw that out the window for Blood Angel players. You're just going to take Sandguard.
Right.
They are about the same cost as Vanguard vets, but they get +1 to hit next to a Warlord. +1 to wound, army-wide trait. I know there's a lot of things negating that, but still, you're just trying to hand them a bunch of saves. Mm-hmm. Sandguard swords are AP3, axes are AP2, so that's still pretty good. Now, like for me, I'm going to take 2 squads of axes because there's still big bugs out there. There's some like Harlequins that are toughness 5 on their vehicles. Now I'm wounding those things on 2s. And I'm still taking a squad of swords for other Marines, stuff like that, with the +1 to wound. Centurions, like you mentioned that, I was just sitting thinking salamander centurions with their flamers with +1 to wound. That becomes really strong again,
on a unit that's tough to remove. Yeah. Because now we're talking about the well, we'll get to it in a little bit, but they got buffed in their trait where not only did they get the Armor of Contempt, they're having a little spiciness with the no rerolls to wound. So now you're looking at, like we said, a ridiculously durable unit with the Flamecraft, bringing that's exactly like what you're saying. It makes complete sense.
And it sounds like a lot of the melee volume is still in that, like you have AP3 weapons, but it does seem like a lot of the volume is in that AP1 or 2 range. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it just sounds like those 2-up armor saves just like still shine.
Yeah, that's the beauty of them. And then if you're going to hit them in melee, their Sandguard are also -1 to hit in melee, which is great. But yeah, that 2-up armor save, things that are charging into them like Harlequins are AP1. With a lot of the weapons, okay, well, I have a 2-up save now against that.
And then you can put a squad into the Assault Doctrine to just bump up that AP. So if you're going up against Marines, you just overcome it.
Yeah, so now my swords are AP4.
That is an incredibly powerful unit, man, because I didn't even think about the -1 to hit there. Think about the implications of that. Not only are like a unit that's pretty killy, like let's talk about Dark Harlequins or something like that, you could almost laugh at that. Yeah. Like that's crazy. To where before, like if we even look just a couple weeks ago, right before this happened, like no one's bringing Sandguard, right? That's insane. The impact is huge. That's crazy.
Well, people would bring Vanguard vets because of the 2-up save, the Storm Shield. And think about this too. All these people that are taking Vanguard vets, Terminators, you just got more points because now you don't need the Storm Shields, right? You don't have to pay those points. You can bring something that, like we talked about, like your Deathwing. Now I'm just going to have a Power Fist and a Stormbolter. Just a little bit of extra shooting because you're still going to have the same save that you would with the Storm Shield. So now you just gain points on your list.
Right.
More Marines.
Exactly. It's amazing. And you net points, which Marines, every point you can get, you're almost fighting for. Points aren't, and the thing is to fill the voids in a Marine list, like if you have 15 extra points, it's so hard to fill that gap. So like that does open that up for the extra bodies you kind of wanted. And in addition to that, the other crazy thing about it is you think about a Storm Shield, the real implication of bringing a Storm Shield is like, dude, okay, I need that 4-up invul. I can't have stuff push me to a 5-up. You don't need it anymore. Armor saves are sufficient. Invulns are at a point now to where it's like, it's almost like kind of like it feels like it's supposed to be like you're getting hit by something gnarly, and that's what your invuln protects you. Otherwise, your armor is doing the job. Dude.
Yeah. So, and then like I know one of the big things that's coming out like NIDS, right? They're flesh borers. Everyone was like, oh my God, they're strength 5, -1, 1 damage, and everyone was in an uproar, like, why are they better than bolters and all this other stuff, right? Well, now you're shooting them into Marines, and you don't care. You're like, all right, I still get my 3 up, you know? So again, the math is just skewing towards Marine survivability. And then the fact that it works on vehicles, we didn't even say anything like that.
Yeah.
Dreadnoughts.
Dreadnoughts are the hot take. I think actually even some other stuff you haven't seen is going to have a better implication than a lot of the dreadnoughts are. You know, you were running a lot of dreadnoughts kind of kicking off last season. You were doing Deathguard stuff. You were running some Salamanders lists that were running a lot of the dreadnoughts. And even then they were durable. But, you know, now we could even see some stuff come into the fold, like some of the Forge World vehicles. We can see, you know, even some things that just have a really high armor save and a really high toughness platform, adding that extra layer. I mean, is there anything you can think about the top of your head like that?
Yeah, so Leviathans and then Telemon Dreadnoughts have the 2-up armor save. Telemons have the toughness 8. And from playing a ton of games of Salamanders, it was always so satisfying when they're like, you know, yeah, so take 5 wounds at AP 1. It's like, oh, I ignore that. And now every Marine gets to say that.
Yep.
So it's like, that was always so satisfying. Power creep has made that like, okay, now take 5 wounds at AP 2, you know?
Right, yeah.
So it's like gotten worse and worse on the AP creep, but like this tones everything down. Because, you know, we saw first it was more AP 1, then it was if it's AP 1 or 2, you reduce it by 1. Now it's like, I don't care what the AP is, reduce it all by 1. And so like, yeah, that, and like you're saying, on the Dreadnoughts that have the -1 damage, they have that. A lot of them typically have smoke launcher keywords, so they have like different layers. Salamanders, you can give them like the Contemptors. They have cores, so you can use the relic to give them a 6-up feel no pain. You can have a Tech Marine if you feel it.
Iron Hands.
Yeah, Iron Hands can do things. They come with the feel no pain, and they have multiple ways to heal. So yeah, they're like. There's fun stuff you can do, like Space Wolves. You can give them light cover, right? So it's like now it kind of really opens up these Dreadnought lists, which we saw some Deathwatch Dreadnought lists kind of pop up. And so it's like, okay, maybe people are going to start tooling around with that.
And those were savage then. Like that was a really difficult list to get rid of just because of the layers of durability on it.
And all the shooting.
And all the shooting. Right. So now we're adding more to that. And I'm like, it's kind of like a little theory that I was talking about where it's like, you keep adding these little gates, like, you know, you're sending something through, it's got to pass this check mark, then that check mark, then that check mark. And eventually so much tapers off that these platforms like that, a 2-up save, toughness, the toughness 8 threshold model is looking real good, right? On across several different platforms.
Yeah, and all those like little things do add up. And you know, I played a handful of games with, you know, the light Harlequins, you know, before all this. And I was just noticing like, it wasn't any particular one thing. It was just like all these little layers, layer. And they're like, well, if you're going to stop me there, then I'm going to try this. It's like, well, actually I have layers on top of layers against that strategy as well. So it's like they just did this one little tweak for Marines, but maybe that layer opens up some strategies we've kind of let go by the wayside because of power creep.
Yeah.
And maybe things come back in. So who knows? Like a Don Hewson style list with, you know, 6 blight haulers. Maybe, you know, try it.
Yeah.
you know, just see what happens. But I do think we're going to see a lot of people trying stuff, at least with like, you know, creating different kinds of looks for shooting armies.
I love that. I think that encouraging all that diversity, pulling the other units in. I mean, I've always felt like kind of it's a little bit annoying when there's stuff in factions that's like, okay, if I roll up in a tournament and I'm going into round 3 or round 4 and I'm up against this faction, I guarantee there's going to be 3 units of bikes of whatever, you know, or, you know, I'm going to see 3 raiders with whatever or anything like that. If it's an auto include, it's kind of like it mutes a lot of the creativity that we see. Yeah. And which is kind of a diminishing effect on the game. Now that when you have these kind of diversifying, impactful like ripple effects, I think it's so sick because the brightest minds in 40k get to pull out things that fit their style and really impose that on the opposition. And that just makes competition thrive. Yeah. You know, I love that. I think it's cool. Back to you, Junior, because I want to dig into a little bit more of that Marine experience. What are some other outlier units that you think might be like something that you might see? You know, we mentioned Centurions. We can hit on that again. Are there any vehicles you can think of that might have play? Are there any like any things that like you've seen before that were like, nah, but now they're like, maybe this has some play, you know?
Yeah, that Forge World Astraeus.
I don't even-
T9, right? It's got void shields. The Salamander trait, I don't know if you want to just throw that in right now.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't had it, we'll go to it right now because we're talking about Marines. I feel like this is really relevant. So I'm going to cruise down here in the data slate to the Space Marine section. So for Salamander specifically, this is what it reads. It says, change the second bullet point of the Forged in Battle, Salamanders, parentheses, chapter tactic to read. Each time an attack is made against a unit with this tactic, that attack's wound roll cannot be re-rolled. So for Salamanders, universal, no re-rolling to wounds. Back to you.
Yeah. So now you got this Astraeus tank that's T9, right? Or with a ton of wounds with void shields. That's just going to sit there. Typically, you would shoot things like Eradicators, you know, things that are strength 8. The Harlequins shooting the prismatic cannon, right? Now you don't get to reroll against that thing, so you got to just hopefully you're
just trying to like
just wound it, you know.
Yeah.
And then it ignores an AP. It's got a 2-up save, so we're talking about that magical 2-up save number,
right?
So you can't just riddle that thing down with a bunch of AP1.
It's getting 4-ups against your Melta.
Yeah. So and most of the time you would save that reroll, you know, in your pocket to be like, all right, I'm gonna reroll here to wound. Because I really need that thing dead, because if that thing's alive, it's going to kill some stuff. The Astraeus shoots hard. So that's one of the things that immediately came to my mind. And
I didn't even think about that till you brought that up.
Like, that's Salamander, Astraeus, tank. Like, come on. Let's bring that in.
Oh, man.
Land Raiders are a little bit tougher now. They're T8 with a 2-up save.
Right, and even, you know, one interesting thing that I was thinking of is, you know, maybe you could actually justify something coming out of a Land Raider, the Crusader variant, to where you can actually trust it might survive, so you can get something out of it.
Yep.
You know, maybe not, but you know, it's
we'll
just
see.
something. It gives you get a look at it. You know, maybe that's something.
Yeah. So Land Raiders, and I think they're okay points costed. You know, like, I think they're what 182.
Land Raiders? I thought they were 265 last I looked.
I don't know. I know they're a lot less than a Storm Raven, which is horrible still.
Right. And then the interesting thing, dude,
but T8 2-up save.
Right. That's the kind of breaking point. And I was kind of looking at some of the stuff. Funny enough, just to mess around, like I was telling you guys, I ran 2 of those Vindicator laser destroyers just to see how they were. Not competitive, but I mean, it was just fun because it's like T8, you get the plus X, you know, the +1, and I was like, this is you know, just something you would never play before that now is all of a sudden something that you can take, you can feel, then it like makes sense. So interesting. So huge rule. Last thing we want to touch on, we talked about Space Marines. Let's talk about a couple of the other factions real quick. Huge implications here for Chaos Space Marines because everything with them seems to have gone lower in points. Now, they've been one of those armies that's just been hanging at the bottom, trying to hang on to have some viability. This breathes a little bit of life into some units of that. And I think it gives you an ability to maybe play some Chaos Space Marines, right? What do we think about them? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, again, anytime I think of any army, I'm like, okay, where am I going to get the volume of shooting? And the first thought I have anytime someone brings up Chaos Space Marines is like, okay, how does this make Obliterators better? So they have the 2-up. So it's like, okay, check.
Right.
So you deep strike them in for free, so you can put them in a pretty
like an aggressive position.
Yeah, an aggressive position where you can put them in cover. Awesome. So maybe you don't need to rely on things like conceal or some other kind of strat to make them untargetable to survive. Maybe they can tank enough on their own. So yeah, it does kind of open up like, okay, if you want to do kind of that shooting army, if you wanted to do like a demon engine army with a bunch of T8 vehicles and then
We mentioned the Deathguard list, right? Is that kind of what you're referring to?
Well, just Nurgle, but go with the demon HQ. I'm blanking on his name.
The Lord Discordant.
No, the guy where you
Master
kill
possessions.
you kill the guy. You have a Nurgle unit kill.
You're talking about Epidemius.
Epidemius.
Epidemius, yeah, because he tallies everything up for you.
Yes. So I knew it wasn't Tallyman. You kill one thing. Now all your demon engines are, they went from ballistic skill 4 to 3. Now they, ignore an additional thing of AP. A lot of them are T8.
Now when your stuff can hang around for a little longer.
Now, yeah, well, and then with Epidemius, you get free rerolls of 1. You kill a few more things. Now they get an extra toughness. So, okay, maybe there's something interesting there.
Right.
So, all that stuff just kind of adds up. And then, just thinking about obliterators with the Nurgle keyword, let me look at what does a Forge Fiend do? But anyway, I forget. So just go look that up. So like what you were saying, let's
Diversity.
blow the dust off of these books and just check out some of the data slates and see, okay, which of the stuff has a 2+ save that I can actually do something with, like a Land Raider and an Astreus. Okay, what can I do with it now?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, what do you think, Junior? I mean, as far as chaos goes, that absolutely valid points there, Logan. Talking about chaos, Zero Comp has a couple really good chaos players on your team as well.
No.
Regarding chaos, what are some things that we think that is there anything you can think of off the top of your head that might actually have play, or just in a quick glance, what are some stuff that faction has to offer that might rise to the top for them?
Yeah. So one of the things I was kind of joking around with James Carmona, who's our main chaos guy. Was Red Corsairs, taking a bunch of Chaos Marines.
You're saying it. I'm feeling it. Yep.
Recycling them, you get more CP. They just became a little bit more survivable,
So the points break on that unit is huge. And once again, this is one more thing that goes there. If we talk about the points of a Chaos Marine, one big thing that I thought, I play Chaos frequently, that's my favorite faction. A Chaos Marine now is just 1 point more than a Sister of Battle. We all know that. So the value's there. It's 1 wound. People have hated on that for a long time. That's true. But now when you're talking about T8 or T4 with leadership 8, you're bringing a chainsword, you explode 6s to hit, you have other different things that pop up with your Legion traits. And now you give them Ignore AP 1 for 12 points a model. And then you talk about Red Corsairs, where I bring them back for free. People have been joking and talking about it, but now you could even give a shot to this 120 Chaos Space Marine list.
Yeah.
Can you kill it? Who knows? But
maybe, but
yeah,
they're gonna have a hard time doing it. Then you still, of course, have Emperor's Children Terminators with double Lightning Claw.
Right.
Again, that 2-up save, a little more survivable now in combat or shooting, because typically you would need, some. Most of the 2 damage shots are AP 1/2. You can overcharge Plasma to get to AP 3 on 2 damage, but now they might, kill themselves doing it. But whatever.
Right.
But Terminators, I think in general, when you're talking about Space Marines,
value.
Doesn't matter which faction, whether you go White Scars, Blood Angels, Emperor's Children, Deathguard.
Yeah.
New Blight Lords. When I say new, because they gained OPSEC, but they look viable again.
I agree. And this brings up an interesting point to think about, because that's very true. I've heard a lot of hype on, and I'm actually pretty excited to talk about this. I've heard a lot of hype about the competitive implication of the durability of units. Staying power, Armor of Contempt means all of my units are going to survive, this and that. But once again, I say, I think of most things first off as Chaos Space Marines. And as non-competitive as they are right now, I do play other factions as well. But the first thing that I thought is, okay, Armor of Contempt is out there. Now there's a great portion of the competitive meta is a power armor based army. And as it rotates, you're going to see that stuff. GW loves that stuff. But most of the stuff in Chaos Space Marines, for example, and then a lot of other Loyalist Astartes stuff, even Sororitas stuff, they rely heavily on neg-2 weapons. So, while I thought about, okay, my staying power is huge here, We talked about obliterators a little bit. Let's talk about units like Possess. Let's talk about things like Noise Marines. Let's talk about all of these things. All of these units now lose some steam into a significant portion of the armies in the 40k universe. And I first thought about that, and I'm like, man, okay, I have a lot of tools out here, but I'm real limited in what I'm going to be able to actually damage these other armies with, because most of the stuff in Chaos Space Marines is, let's look at the things that are notably like our hardest hitting stuff. Most people were taking Reaper chain cannons because volume. I'm going to double shoot. I'm going to shoot, 32 shots times 2 for the 64 shots with Vets of the Long War. Well, now I'm AP 0.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I got obliterators, those things, same thing. I can drop them into aggressive position. They're D3. All right, if I roll anything but a 5-up, I'm -0. Okay, so let's switch to melee. All right, what is the one thing that has a couple wounds and an invuln that I can deal with? Okay, I got possessed. Okay, -2.
Yeah.
So, and that's speaking CSM. This applies to a lot of the other things that are in the 40k universe, So what do we think about that? That's one thing that I don't feel like has been talked about a lot, but I felt really kind of sketch about that is going to shake things up, because a lot of people are talking about lightning claws a lot. But I'm like, dude, okay, now you're going to see, I feel like you're going to see a somewhat of a resurgence of Marines, Blood Angels, especially Salamanders, especially all these 2-up things that are going to be really hard to chew through. And you're talking about bringing lightning claws.
Yeah, but in melee and assault doctrine, things like Blood Angels,
that's an outlier. But I'm just my question here is, how do we think that this also impacts the killing power of certain armies across the 40k universe? And what do you guys think are some things that might really be affected by that, and also some things that actually might shine through that? We'll start with you, Junior.
Well, I think Tau, if you still want to think about them, like their plasma rifles are all AP3.
Right.
So you'll see a switch to a lot of that instead of the flamers and their airburst cannons. So like he said earlier, you're either gonna try to make them take a lot of wounds, roll a lot of dice, or you're looking at things in your book that are going to be AP 2, 3, and up, without getting too expensive points wise. That's the kicker, because Marines, I can throw out Eradicators. They're AP 4, right? But that's a lot of points in a small little unit. That's only going to kill one thing a turn, because they have to target the same thing in order to shoot twice.
Yeah.
So they have a limitation there. I think another look at Inceptors, because their plasma is AP 3.
Right.
So trying on that. So I think you're going to see people try to bring AP 2 or 3 more reliably, as opposed to like AP 1. You might skip out on that.
Right.
And that's just because this armor contempt, and then of course you're not going to see Custodes anymore. But
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that later.
Coming to you next.
But as far as killing power, look for things that are AP 3.
And as far as like the power armor mirror match, you're like, okay, I'm building CMSM. What do I do against other power armor armies? I feel like that's where loyalists kind of have a little bit of that mirror breakers, their doctrines, to get that extra point of AP. So, against Sisters and CSM, it's like they have just like that little bit of an advantage on them. Especially if you have rules, Dark Angels putting stuff back into the right doctrine where you want to be. Blood Angels saying, okay, I'm going to be in
advance into this doctrine.
Yeah. Like where you can manipulate where you put your AP. That gives loyalist Marines just, that little edge.
Here's an interesting thing that just popped up into my head because we were talking about the doctrines and going across. I wonder if there's maybe we'll see a little more use of the stratagems that are like 6s cost an extra AP now on those real crutch moments where you're like, hey man, maybe my army can attack. I can pick a doctrine and whatever the weapons associated to get that extra AP on 6s. Maybe that's something that's going to have some play now. Because before you look at that and you're like,
nobody used it.
I'm never going to use that ever. But now maybe in the Marine matchup, you're going to be like, okay, dude, maybe I hit, Wrath of the Lion 1 CP, and now I can actually dump Bolter Fire and pop that AP up here and there to kind of push some wounds through.
Yeah. One of the big things like Drukhari, for instance, Incubi perfect, AP 3, If they roll a 6 to wound, they go AP4.
Yep.
That's what you want. Hellions, I know a lot of people are talking about that. That they're dead, AP1. Cult of Strife, they also have that 2 CP to up their AP by 1.
Yeah.
So now you're going to AP2, 6s become AP3.
Right.
So you're right, those stratagems that nobody would ever use.
Now they have play.
Now you might actually use them.
Because I think about that in the my Dark Angels army, and I'm like, maybe I could see now situations where I set up a turn where I'm like, okay, this turn I really would need to like crush this objective, and I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of extra bolter fire. I'd love to get some extra mileage out of it. 1 CP will do that here and there. I like to see bringing that, making some other stratagems relevant seems pretty cool to me. I like that. And it's just, I mean, everything we've talked about so far is like a ton of ripple effects off of just one change, which is pretty sick. I think that of all the ways that we were thinking about what could have brought certain armies up into the game, I think this was an excellent way to do it. I think I'm pretty happy with it as far as that goes,
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So a lot to talk about with Armor Contempt. Obviously, we don't have enough time in the world to cover every single thing we could go over, but those are just some quick things we can talk about, some implications that we kind of think of initially, and some stuff that we're going to be looking out for and looking out to impose, right, with Armor of Contempt.
Yeah.
That's huge. So Armor Contempt was the first thing. Let's move back down this data slate. Indirect fire weapons. Long time coming, right?
Oh, thank God.
So Eldar came out. Well, I'm going to preface this a little bit. Eldar came out, right? We saw double Night Spinners everywhere. And, every Ulthway list, Eldar list is running 2 spinners, 2 units of platforms, just blasting stuff with AP2 everywhere. Marines are just getting dealt from out of line of sight, right? Let's go back, right? And then before that, we're talking SoCal Open. Hive Guard are everywhere, double shooting, hitting you with, what is it, AP3 flat 2, or is it AP3 2 damage or something?
It's D3 damage, but then they can re-roll the damage.
Right.
So it became pretty efficient shooting at strength 8.
Yeah.
So
just, you can't do anything about it. It's like, dude, and then let's go back, and then like before that, even like way back, we're talking about manticores, and then
Squig buggies.
The buggies. Dude, buggies were there just dumping, something that's been plaguing the game for a long time, right?
Yep.
So this is a welcome change. I think we can all say that, right?
Well, I loved my 9 broadside list.
Smart missiles.
But this really, I mean, this just...
You want to read it, Logan?
Yeah, so basically, you want me to read it verbatim? So indirect fire weapon is one that can target units that are not visible to the bearer. So if such weapon targets a unit that is not visible, basically no models in the target unit are visible to the firing unit. Each time you make an attack with that weapon against the target this phase, worsen the ballistic skill characteristic of that attack by 1, and add 1 to any armor saving throws made against that attack. So SMS shooting at a Marine normally...
Yeah, let's back it up real quick, talking about Armor of Contempt here.
Yeah.
Last, models under the effects of any other rule that worsens or reduces the armor penetration characteristic don't stack. This is adding, so it seems like a very deliberate. Continue.
Yeah, so it's like, we're not messing with AP or anything. So it's like, okay, my AP1 SMS is now putting these Marines up to a 4 up. And there's, through Unity of Devastation, could have made some of them too. But for the most part, it's going to be AP1 wounds. So, okay, your Marines are saving on 4s because I'm ignoring light cover. But now it's like, hey, we're taking that AP away from you, so they're back to saving on 3s. Oh, and it's out of line of sight, so their armor is being improved by 1. So now that 4 up goes to 2 up.
So by virtue of targeting them with a smart missile, you're making them a Terminator.
Yeah.
And you hit worse.
And I hit worse. So instead of hitting you on 4s, which I could have made, long strike gives them like a marker light, so it's like, okay, I could probably be hitting you on 3s. Now it's, hey, my ballistic skill is now a 5. The best I can do is a 4. Mm-hmm. And if I'm shooting at you in dense and I don't have a marker light, I'm hitting you on 6s.
Right.
So
it's, dude, and that's for Tau, one of the better armies in the game. Like the other stuff is just done for. I think that this is a huge crippling effect.
I took out all my smart missile systems out of my list.
Right, yeah. And now, before we get too far ahead, we'll definitely we're going to discuss this in and out. But a big key note here is Astra Militarum and indirect fire. There's a excerpt here that says, attacks made with indirect fire weapons by Astra Militarum models are unaffected by any of the indirect fire rules presented above. So Completely misses Astra Militarum. I think that's necessary.
Yeah.
Bouncing back, this is huge.
Astra Militarum were so bad that they had to do something to even try to make it relevant to them.
Right.
And this is still not going to help them too much. Like, they're not going to be winning a ton of games. But let's just say that they're so bad that they had to to help them with this.
Yeah, and that's
and then just the other thing about indirect fire in general, like if anybody's played competitively recently, you have player placed terrain, you have this GW terrain, that's all line of sight blocking. The reason why player placed terrain is so good, it's because you're trying to mitigate that offensive firepower that you're seeing all these armies getting turned up on.
right.
But when you have units that just ignore that rule, that creates a whole feels bad moment. Like, okay, I perfectly hit all my stuff. Like when I played Logan.
Right.
When I played Logan at a GT, with his buggy list, I put this terrain to where he cannot shoot me at all, like with anything directly. But he still was able to shoot me with these indirect units and just...
Right, and the big thing is that it disincentivizes. It doesn't matter how tactically perfect you are in your deployment. You have to make all of these sequencing choices in the pregame. You have to set up your terrain correct. You have to understand what your mission is. You have to deploy based on those things to maximum effectiveness in the highest level of competition. You have to do all of these things that are really nuanced and really difficult, and only the best players are doing this perfectly, and none of it matters.
Yeah.
It is completely inconsequential, which is absurd for the competitive game state, right? Yeah. We're playing a competitive game that is a simulated battle, which should reward tactical decisions and smart setup and using your battlefield terrain. And this indirect fire completely just took that element out of the game to a massive degree.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I think that alone right there is enough for that to be crushed. It's a thing that has been abused for a while. It's a hard mechanic to make work, and it was too difficult. It's either all the way skewed, it was like aircraft, all the way skewed, or it was too good or too bad. You know, and I think that with the way you want to play a game, you want to have a fun game of 40K. You want your victories to be based on your decisions, not just off of immutable, data sheets and stuff you can't help. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the big implication here. So completely taking this down a notch, you really take a penalty to shooting anything with any sort of indirect. Now, Astra Militarum still has it. It feels like they should, and they're in an old rule set anyways. Does this completely remove the need or the value to any indirect? Is there any stuff out there we can think of that you're like, okay, maybe some of this chip damage does make sense? Or does this completely kill it? What do you guys think?
I don't think completely, because Eldar you can take 3 Shadow Weavers, just a unit of 3, and then you have strats that give them +1 to hit, and then reroll ones. So if you just have a unit of 3, and if like in the meta you see a bunch of toughness 3 bodies or whatever out there, it's like, okay, I need something to kill this cheap unit out of a corner. Yeah, then maybe a single unit of 3. But I think like hey, let me fill my army, let me spend half of my points on indirect. Yeah, I think that's dead. Yeah. But as far as like, and I think probably for a lot of armies, like for me, my Tau, I've taken it out. I think you can probably still make air bursting fragmentation projectors work, because you have the speed to get line of sight on things. Yep. But it's not what it's going to be, and I think that's a good thing. And I think some armies, if they have specific ways to overcome this limitation, then yeah, you can see some. But
right, I think that it feels like they should be able to. You can get to that unit back there that's holding a backfield. Maybe back in the day, some servitors or something like that. You can chip out some servitors or reach those things, but you're not wholesale murking stuff like you would. Then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So not dead per se, just highly
very different.
If it's in a list, it's probably going to be very deliberate for a very, very narrow and specific purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I took with my Blood Angels list a Whirlwind, right? I didn't use it for killing anything. I used it for the stratagem.
Right.
You can't Overwatch and you're fighting last.
Yep.
You know, something from range. So I think you'll see, you know, some utility that way. But yeah, I think you still need some indirect for things like Harlequins only have a 4-up invuln. So if you're just trying to make them roll their 50-50 save.
Yeah, if you have a +1 to hit, then stuff into them actually makes sense because you're ignoring half the detriment, you know, and then you can overcome the other half to be on normal ballistic skill. AP doesn't matter. Just once again, hand some saves.
Yeah, you kill the transport, troops pop out, indirect the troops.
Yep, I like it.
So
yeah, it's just going to be something a tool that you use in your toolbox, not like the whole blueprint.
Yeah,
you know? Yeah, I like.
It's not my game plan anymore.
Right. Yeah. Just crystal targeting matrix. Yeah, for sure. Okay. So indirect fire weapons, really diminished, really good, really healthy thing for the game. All right, Bodyguard. Let's talk about Bodyguard here. This is a big one because this has been something that's been controversial. This is a controversial rule in the game for a long time. We were talking about it a little bit. We started seeing this, and it was a rule, and it was all right. You'd have company vets, and they'd be screening a Marine character. Kind of annoying. Okay, but we dealt with it, right? Move forward, starts to be summer of the 2021 ITC season, early summer. Now we're bodyguarding vehicles in Talon Masters, right?
Yeah.
Talon Masters come out, we're seeing Deathwing Command, and like, okay, that's clearly busted, but what can we do about it? Okay. Fast forward to the end of summer, end of summer. Now we see a bodyguard unit, and then bodyguarding a unit stringing out to the end of your character, and now I've got a 9 to 12 inch bodyguarded untouchable thing, and it only gets more ludicrous from there, right? And next thing you know, we're bodyguarding hammerheads. Like this has just been this has been the most busted thing, or just controversial. This has been a rule that has not felt right in one single instance all of last year into this year, right? And I'm glad GW finally did something with it. So for the change on this, bodyguard abilities. Change the end of all bodyguard abilities from enemy models and units cannot target that character unit with ranged attacks. 2, that character unit can use the Lookout Sir rule even if the unit contains fewer than 3 models. If a unit's bodyguard ability only affects a specific type of character unit, the updated version of that unit's bodyguard ability still only applies to that type of character unit. E.g., a Cryptothrall's Protector's ability only applies to friendly Cryptech units. And so the new form of the ability only applies to Cryptech units. Huge. Huge.
Yep.
Yes. Again, I love to shoot things. You bodyguard something, now I'm forced to shoot the bodyguard before I can interact with characters.
And you probably couldn't see him.
Yeah.
Right, which is why I love the 9 broadsides, because it's like, okay, you have bodyguards there. At least I can target something. You know, I use my indirect to at least hit the bodyguard units. And if I can kill them, like the wardens or whatever, if I can somehow chew through them, then I can at least interact. But so if you're going to take away my indirect, well then please do something about bodyguard. Otherwise, like, I'm just going to get rolled over by bodyguarded characters. And they did that.
Yeah, which is huge. And I think that the other implication was the units. That was a big deal.
Yep.
Once it got to Long Strike, that to me was the straw. I'm like, dude, like, come on now. Like, I think that this is awesome. I feel like this is so much more organic in the sense that, like, it feels right. A lot of rules should feel right? And then I'm like, so now you're bodyguarded. You get the Lookout Sir rule, even if there's one dude, which makes sense. But you can still be targeted by snipers and all of the stuff that comes along with that. It just makes sense. I mean, what are your thoughts, Junior? What do you think about that?
I love the rule. I've had some really dumb interactions with characters and bodyguards. Like to give you an example, I've had my succubus in close combat with a vehicle, hit it, and we did the roll-off thing, could not fall back, but I had a bodyguard unit next to my succubus, so the vehicle still couldn't shoot my succubus because of the bodyguard rule, even though it was in close combat with it, and then my succubus just goes in there and does its thing. So that kind of interaction is gone now. Like, thank God.
I didn't even think about that. That's so
you know, I've done that a couple of times with my units, like my captain with Thunderhammer, and then I have my bodyguard like, oh, you can't shoot my captain because even though you're in close combat with it, and then I get to strike first, and because we're in ongoing combat, and my captain just murks
Big
whatever.
Guns reads you're only eligible to fire at a unit engagement range, so you can't even shoot the bodyguard.
No. So it's just hanging out. But it's definitely a rule that needed to be changed. I've had my Sanguinary Guard and, my Sanguinary Priest, it was against Logan, just out in the open on an objective with 2 bodyguards. It's when he was playing against Salamanders, so there's no indirect. And my 2 out of line of sight company vets were just hanging out, not being shot. I didn't care. They're 40 points. They're there. Now my Sanguinary Priest is getting me an objective, points every turn.
Right.
Yep.
And Logan can't do anything about it. So it's definitely a feels bad. I think I love the change to it the way it is right now. But I think bodyguards should still be out in the open if they're gonna be out there bodyguarding. You know what I mean? Like that's the whole
I think it makes
point.
sense. I think the way it makes sense is good. It still gives some value.
Yeah.
But it's a value that would make sense, and it doesn't give you that obscure, like, this is clearly not right, but the rule words this way. I think it's cool. Like, okay, if I got one of these dudes, I can still make sure my characters are safe. You can still do some of it, but there's ways to tactically maneuver around it. We talked a little bit about rewarding making good decisions and good maneuvering, tactical play. This is one of those rules that can go both ways. If I have this one little dude, I can nullify some incoming fire and protect some guys, but at the same time, another good general could also circumvent it, which is solid. I really think that's good. I think that's a very healthy thing for the game. All right, moving down this data slate, Adeptus Sororitas. So they're Armor Contempt. They're having it, and they have a couple changes here. The first bullet point. Change the first bullet point of gaining a miracle dice section of the Acts of Faith ability to read. At the start of this turn, or each turn, you gain 1 miracle die. So they're gaining more, right? Double the miracle dice. Okay, huge. And then change the second bullet point of the Stoic Endurance for Valorous Heart. This is just in line with the Salamanders thing, where they used to ignore AP 1 and 2, I believe, or degrade it, and now it changes it to same as Salamanders, you cannot reroll wounds. Pretty good for Valorous Heart. You're keeping half of your original, and then you're also gaining some net value there, so it's pretty good. So let's talk about Sisters real quick. Sisters, we're gaining +1 to our saves. We got power armor. We're gaining an extra miracle die, and you can't reroll wounds against Sister stuff in Valorous Heart. What do we think about that? Is it pretty good? What does that do? What does that do to Sisters? How does it help them? And where does that put them? I know some people are really raving about it. Some people are saying, man, this really brings Sisters up. They're really viable. They can really play. I've also heard some other regions and some other teams being like, they're still Sisters, bro, at the end of the day. I don't know. What do we think? Let's talk about it. And if we're going to have, let's dissect it and kind of see what we really think. What do we think? What are some strengths? Let's talk about that. What is the strength, and what are some things that really rise to the top with these changes?
Well, again, having more miracle dice is obviously a boon. And just with their current codex, they lost the ability to have a ton of miracle dice. When they switched over from 8th to 9th edition. So this gives them that tool back.
Right.
So they can do more things. They can spend more seat. They have more options. We talked about using stratagems to I'm going to manipulate the dice with this miracle dice. Now they have more options for that. Do I think it's going to bring them up to Space Marine level? No, because you're still talking about toughness 3 models. And Valor's Heart, I mean, you can not re-roll the wounds against them, but they're toughness 3.
They're toughness 3. So you're it's not going to net you. Once again, we're talking about statistics and math here. When you're already wounding on a lower threshold on the die, there's not as much of a statistical percentage for net gain back. It's a low margin trying to convert another low margin rather than having a big void, which you could pull back more into.
Do they have any 2-wound Sisters, or are they all 1 wound?
They're all 1.
Yeah, so like Marines, we're talking about 3 and 4 wound models. You
can promote inefficiency or like weird interactions.
Or Sangard, which are 2-up save, 2 wound. So it's like, all right, multi-wound model, everything's multi-wound. So it's for Sisters, it's just the issues, the data sheets, and the way the power creep has just gone out of hand. And from my perspective, looking at it, I'm like, I don't see oppressive shooting firepower. I just don't see like where, I don't see a way where they can build to really stack up against the
Some of the
top
other stuff out there.
Yeah, the armies you're going to see at the top tables.
A couple things I thought were good. So I have played a game against Sisters with the new Armor of Contempt. It was interesting. I felt like the plus save didn't come into effect very much at all. It mattered, but it wasn't the impact that you would see on Space Marines, just like you said. But one thing that I did notice was interesting is the guy that I played against took, it opened up Leap of Faith and opened up that secondary a lot more, which was cool. Because he was able to actually manipulate that, and it seemed like it went from like, almost probably you never take this, to something that was very easy.
Yep.
The other thing is good. Sisters have a lot of mechanics where you can burn a die in order to do something else, right? Yeah. They have some of the mechanics to do that. And when you have a bigger pool of dice and a larger chance to get bad dice, like dice that are mediocre, mid-range stuff, he was able to just burn them and not really care as much, to where like earlier stages, I felt like, if I remember right, it would be like, dude, I can't really, like if I'm burning a miracle die, either I got garbage, which is already bad for me, or I'm burning something that I need. So I thought that was actually another good thing as well. That was pretty solid there. Another thing I wonder about with Sisters, they might not suffer from it as much, but it was what I talked about was the inverse of the Armor of Contempt, where I wonder how much of their hitting power gets taken away because Armor of Contempt coming out as well. Do Sisters have a lot of, I feel like things like Repentia and Retributors obviously are going to have a really high AP threshold, but their mainstay weapons, I'm not super familiar. What are they looking at? Do we know?
Flamers and bolters is a lot of their stuff.
So bolters are probably AP 0. I don't think that there's a way that they're getting that. Their flamers, do they have access to AP 1 or was it already AP 0?
I think it's already AP 0.
So then they kind of got away pretty good there. They didn't take like what I feel like Chaos is taking with losing half of their AP. So that's good then for them. Kind of they don't seem to be really scathed as far as offensively by Armor of Contempt into the things that we might see more, which is good. And their Miracle Dice, some of the options and secondaries and stratagems that go off Miracle Dice are going to be a little more accessible. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like we said, they actually don't, we feel like, benefit as much from Armor of Contempt. So Sisters, does this bring Sisters? This is the question. And I think it changes. A lot of high-level players I've talked to have a lot of different opinions. Right here with the three of us, does this make Sisters an army that's going to podium?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think so.
They
I
still
think
can't compete with the firepower of some of these other codexes.
If you are a primary Sister player, that's all you play. These are nice quality of life changes. You know, things get better for you objectively, but no, I wouldn't expect to go to a big event and be in the top.
Rough. Yeah, so it's just basically durability is going to be the major issue. That T3 threshold and the wounds being one wound, the nature of the army itself. Yeah. Unless you're bringing like tons of bodies or maybe. So I'm curious to see what the competitive minds are going to come up with regarding Sisters. But that's our thought on them. I do like to see that it does open up some avenues for people that like the army to be able to play them to a way higher level than being dead, because they were done for a minute, like supremely done for.
More Miracle Dice, they could probably make more charges out of reserves.
Right, yeah. Alrighty. Astra Militarum.
Yeah.
Another army. Let's see what's another T3 army. A lot of changes here. Yep. So add the following to the detachment abilities of an Astra Militarum unit. Hammer of the Emperor. If every regiment unit in your army is drawn from the same regiment, each time a regiment model from your army makes a ranged attack, an unmodified hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds the target. Note that units listed as advisors and auxilia do not prevent other Astra Militarum units from your army from gaining this rule, but advisors and auxilia never benefit from it. So, army-wide, 6 is the hit auto wound.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Very good. Next bullet point. Change the save characteristics of Leman Russes to 2+. That existed, correct?
Yeah, the next few, except for the bottom, existed.
Yeah.
All right, so we had the 2+ for Leman Russes, the tank orders changes, and the voice of command. That was the big stuff that's already been there. And then the change to the point costs. So all of the upgrades went to 0 points.
Yes.
Huge. We're talking las cannons, power fists, plasma guns, flamers, Voxcasters, anything. Everything now, so anything that goes into an infantry squad is free, and 6 is auto hit.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? A lot more value.
I think it's neat. It's cool. I mean, I have a lot of Guard gathering dust in my closet. This does make me want to, I have a ton of Vox caster models.
Does the dust come off?
No.
Okay.
But like I have a ton of those Vox caster models, which is like, I'm never going to play these. But,
Right.
now I just get them. I at least get to have the option of putting them on the table now instead of, feeling like they're wasted points.
So because this is really in the interest of like a lot of the competitive stuff going on here, I think we can establish that this is awesome.
Yeah.
Let's hit over it real quick. Some open up some stuff that or some stuff that this might open up, and then we'll move to the next thing because I don't think that this is not game breaking, but it's very cool.
No, I think when I read all these changes, I'm like, okay, the list I want to run then is Pask, 3 tank commanders, 2 mana cores with a full payload, maybe a wyvern, and then like 9 infantry squads, all with las cannons and plasma.
Yep, and you put the fist in there, Boxcaster.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, that's the list I would run, and hopefully there's some points left over for some quality of life stuff. But like that would be the core.
So interesting. I mean, you're going to throw a lot of volume. A few Catechins are going to look good. Cadians are going to look good because reroll abilities and stuff like that. I'm going to ask the same question I asked with Sisters. Can this podium a GT?
They still have fundamental issues of having a lower ballistic skill, not being able to reroll all, unless you're playing against like Chaos or something like that.
Another army that's equivalent.
Yeah, but just for Cadia, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, against something like that.
Yeah.
We just reroll hits and wounds. They don't have a lot of rerolls on their big guns. I think you can give your tank order to a squad now of mana cores or something like that, and then you can reroll ones.
But still,
if you're already Cadian, you reroll ones. So I think that's going to be a thing. But the problem with Guard, it's things are a lot faster with some of these melee armies. When I think about melee armies, like let's just talk about Harlequins. Sure, they're hitting on 4s, right? But now you're -1 to hit. Now you're hitting on 5s,
right?
For your entire army. Right, against most of the Harlequin stuff.
That's another one of those thresholds too. That's a big. The difference between 4s to 5s is huge,
right?
Yeah, that's a major impact.
The Guard, they don't really have a lot of ways to get +1 a hit or anything like that. And then if you get them in combat, they
melt. Yeah,
they're just gone.
Right.
You got Harlequins that are how many, like 95 points? They can take 2 squads of infantry
they would
in
shred,
one turn.
Especially if you're talking like Twilight or Dark or some of these builds we're going to start seeing now.
Yeah.
They will lawn mow all those guardsmen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just don't think they have like the big haymaker units that other armies have.
And
they just can't do all the damage.
And the thing that sucks about them too, when you're living on that 4-up thing in an older rule set, you're at the mercy of the pendulum effect. Like some games, everything's going to go right and you might pull one out. Some games, everything's going to go wrong, but most of the time you're in the middle and it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right? So hang in there, Guard players. You will get something, and I have a feeling when it comes out, it's going to be good. Just got to wait a little longer, right?
Yeah.
All right, so Guard. We don't think Guard are going to podium anything yet. Adeptus Custodes. Rest in peace, guys.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think we can move on. I think,
Custodes got. I think the whole community, the whole competitive community, is in unison. This army got wrecked.
Yeah.
So let's preface this. The army was in a kind of a bonkers state. It was overperforming. Mm-hmm. It was. Unfortunately, it really performed to a high level and then was a little bit more under the radar than it probably should have been because it was eclipsed by Tau than Harlequins. But that being said, it was performing at like upper 60 win rate, which is very high. That's the level that Drukhari was at when there was no other competition, to put it in perspective. Very high level. There's some things in that army that were very oppressive. The ability to take some units that are overly durable, strip away all of your opponent's efficiency, and then add both flexibility and speed to that unit. All of that together made a combination that was a little bit too much and a little too oppressive. Most armies in the game, outside of the top cut of 9th edition rule sets could handle that. So you were talking about an army that smashed everything until it got into like Tau or the mirror match. And then at that point, now we have a game, which is the wrong way to go. So that's the preface of this. We're talking about, some things. And then I think that though they have a low amount of data sheets, it was one of those things where we fall into that. It's like Grey Knights were. There's one build, 1 to 2 builds. If you're going to play somebody that's competitive, okay, you switched 5 Wardens for 5 Voidsmen, but it's the same army, and it was what it was, and it was just spammed everywhere. And, so started really competing, and a lot of people really didn't like the fact that they transhumaned to shut off all your rerolls. That's huge. And then I did feel like there was too much ability to affect these things that were they felt like they should be static. Like you think about their katas and how those were kind of like command protocols. They're supposed to you're supposed to be rewarded for solid foresight in a game, right? You pick this setup because you feel the game's going to flow through this way. You predict the game correctly and you're rewarded for it. You pick it incorrectly, you have to overcome inefficiency. Unless you're this or that or whatever, and I'm going to pay 1 CP and switch them all back to whatever. It just doesn't why even have katas?
Yeah.
Or
for free.
Trajan does it for free, yeah. And then, that, and then also I'm Emperor's Chosen. So now my chapter tactic doesn't matter because I get all the chapter tactics when it matters. Right. So it's too much versatility, too many rules all stuck to one thing at a time, in my opinion. And it really pushed this game state to where it was a difficult thing to overcome. And I think it was even more oppressive against the, not the highest level of a tournament, but like the middle level guys. You're just going to steamroll these people and they're having fun, and that's rough. Let's talk about Custodes. So first, let's talk about the game state, your guys' opinion on how they were. And then we'll have, Logan, go ahead, we'll read that after we're done talking about it. And we'll talk about what they got hit with and what we think about it.
Yeah, so, I agree with everything you're saying. It was just kind of funny. The game was so killy, so efficient, and just, you want something to die. If you're playing a good army, like you can kill it. But Custodes are saying, hey, all of the efficiencies you have, I'm gonna just blunt all of that. And it's gonna be on these targets that are 2 up, 4 up, and if they're bikes, then they're T6. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna blunt your offense so much that you're not gonna be able to really do anything. And then we still have all of our killiness, and now we're gonna go and wreck you. So it's interesting, as Tau, I brought a list with 22 rail weapons, and so I ended up playing a lot of Custodes, that they had all of that power to blunt the offense. And I had to bring turn things up to 11 and then, kick in an overdrive. And I was still able to kill them, overcome their really, no one else could blunt your efficiency like they could.
No.
And they just made them super tough. And I was able to overcome that. Now you take a lot of those tools away. You really haven't done anything to their data sheets or their points. The army's the same. The only thing that's different is they're like what they can do, where they just can't say, okay, 2 CP, this unit is now just pull your hair out, frustrating to kill.
Right.
And now you take that away, and it's like, okay, now you don't have to be where my Tau list was as far as this insane level of killiness. Now that really opens up how many armies now, it's a much wider range of what can just kill them.
Right.
And so you really haven't, it's just kind of insane. You just take a couple of tools away from them, and they go from this really oppressive force it's going to win events. You're going to get some really good Custodes players. They're going to outplay Tau players, maybe some Harlequin players, and end up winning here and there, and just completely dominating the lower tier armies. To now, the range of what can actually handle them has gotten a lot wider than just what's at the top.
Right.
And it's just amazing that that little tweak. I think it kind of shows where the game is. It's there's so much pressure so much offensive pressure and then so much defensive pressure that any, tilt one way or the other,
has a massive effect.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
like the dam breaks through and like the force just swings so violently.
Right.
So these bullet points didn't really change like a ton, but
There's
it was
only
enough.
three. There's only three.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem like a lot, but they are impactful. So let's go ahead and read these, Logan. Let's see what we got here.
So first one is change the third bullet point of the detachment abilities of Depths Custodes to read troop units into Depths Custodes attachments gain the objective secured ability. So only the troop units.
Right. So the big thing is this is the big thing that's taken away from characters. What else was it was mainly the characters is what this is targeting.
Trajan, Wardens, the Aloris Custodians, where I can just drop a single 60-point dude on an
With
objective.
OBSEC, yeah.
Vexillas, those all lost OBSEC. Venatari. But yeah, I think that needed a change.
Yeah, that was a hard thing to deal with. A lot of OBSEC, a lot of board control of that army out of not that much.
Right. Show me another army where characters are OBSEC.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Right.
Like just Lehman Russ is in a spearhead detachment.
There you go.
There's your one. But yeah, like a single 60-point dude will out OBSEC you.
Crazy. Second bullet point.
Add the following to the esteemed amalgam: Emperor's Auspice and Martial Discretion stratagems. You can only use this stratagem once.
Insanity. So, esteemed amalgam, I believe, is the Emperor's Chosen one that allows you to switch your chapter tactic for a turn. Emperor's Auspice is huge. That's the no rerolls.
No rerolls.
And then Martial Discretion is the one that lets you shuffle your katas, right?
That allows you to pick a unit and make them benefit from a kata that was not already been used. So yeah, you can just
That's ridiculous.
more flexibility there.
It was so the thing about this that I like is the rerolls is obvious, but I really like that they take away the ability to on the fly correct your bad decisions I hate that. So I think that this, while it's two of the three are not necessarily a crazy punishment, they make you have to make good decisions and play a perfect game, which is what winning the highest level of GTs and super majors and all that should be. To me, that makes sense. Now, Emperor's Auspice, that's a different animal. Heavy-handed.
Yeah, I think that should have been 2 to 3 CP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that would have been fine. Just making it, once per game.
Right.
That's
It needed to be a resource that was sold dearly, but not necessarily only once.
Yeah, there's like a line of like, okay, 1 CP where I can do this multiple phases in the same turn.
Well, and
turn.
Custodians were regenerating a lot of CP well. They didn't spend CP on anything, so you're starting the game with double digits, and then every one you're gaining essentially 2 per turn, and you're spending 3. You're ending a game as Custodians with 6 or 7 CP, which is the only army doing that. Mm-hmm. So I mean, but the remedy, once you can only use it once. That's pretty crazy. That was kind of gutting. I didn't see that coming.
No.
I don't feel bad about it. I just thought it was one of those things that was. I felt like that turned into a crutch in the game.
Yeah.
That once again, I mean, if we're talking about competitive Warhammer and rewarding good decisions in environments that are difficult to make those to see the right path, this was just, you could just stumble your way through it and just no rerolls, and it would carry you.
Yeah, and that was like my main gripe about Custodes was, no offense to anybody out there that played them at a high level, you didn't need a high level of brain to play this army in particular. It was already super efficient with everything hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Oh, I'm going to keep Trajan around here. I'm going to also wound on 2s.
You're 100%.
Re-rolling 1s.
You're almost at what's like.
You had a brain dead army. Where and you said earlier, you make mistakes, you can just switch it up.
I'm gonna undo my mistake.
I remember playing your teammate Jason, and I was making big brain moves with my little Drukhari, trying to keep things in combat, and he's like, "Oh, I'll just fall back." Okay, great. You know.
Oh, I kept doing. Yeah, I'll just fall back and charge.
Yeah, I'm just gonna fall back, shoot and charge. All right, cool. But it's things like that where I'm making like these plays where I'm trying to like tag all these things, you know, keep you in combat, keep you from shooting me, and then you're just like, all right, I'm gonna ignore that and do my own thing with super efficiency. Like they didn't have a minus to hit when they fell back.
Right.
So they're still hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, because they're gonna fall back next to Trajan.
Put your dice away. Just
you know what I mean?
Put your
Like,
dice away.
oh,
How
I'm
many
gonna
attacks
shoot
do you
8
have?
times?
Okay, I'll roll that many
Yeah,
saves.
you shoot 8 times. Okay, let me just make my 8 saves now.
Yeah.
You know, like, so I'm glad that this changed. You know, I have stratagems where, like as a Drukhari player, I re-roll wounds for 2 CP, and you're going to turn off for 1 CP. So now you're talking about you start with double-digit CP. I don't, and when your CP is a huge resource in games,
Right.
right? I have to spend 2 CP first, you know, to re-roll my wounds with, you know, my grotesques, and then reactively you can just say, I'm going to turn that off for 1 CP, so half the cost. So now I already spent my 2, so I'm already spent. Now for 1 CP, you just turn that off.
That's just a joke at that point.
And you roll a 5 up. Oh, I got that CP back. So really, you spent 0 to turn off my 2 CP stratagem, which I needed because I'm wounding you on 5s. You know, like.
Tell me this happened to you.
Oh, it did. Daniel did it to me a couple of times.
Oh my goodness.
You know, like I'm just.
Yeah. See, so
it deterred me from even using my stratagems because I'm like, why am I going to do this?
the big thing is, I think that here, yes, it hurts that army a lot and takes away a lot of their viability, but that type of interaction right there is just so unhealthy, I think. And I agree that I think a lot of what we're seeing in these, the underlying tone here is to make it to where you actually do have to face some difficult decisions with custodians. And I think that's the big thing.
Yep.
Let's move to the last one, Logan. What do we got here?
Yeah, change the Adeptus Custodes keyword in all instances on the Arcane Genetic Alchemy and Emperor's Auspice stratagems to read Adeptus Custodes Infantry.
This one is huge. And I think of all of them, this one might be the most, like, I don't know how necessary that was. What do you think?
I mean, you played 9 bikes every time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So this is going to make you not take 9 bikes or 14 bikes, as in Mr. Gabetsky.
Yeah, I guess that's true. You saw 9 bikes in every single custodian list. 9 bikes, Trajan, and some shield bros, and like that. Once again,
I saw a few with 6.
Yeah.
That was like bare minimum.
they took 5 Venatari.
Yeah.
Same thing.
But I think this is going to make Custodes players go back into the book and, you know, really squeeze out some stuff in order to be competitive again.
Yeah.
But yeah, this definitely needed to change. The bikes being super efficient with a, you know, +1 wound on the charge next to Trajan. Hitting on 2s, reroll 1s.
Same story, same every time. Yeah.
Like,
so here's the thing, interesting. So same question. Let's talk about this. Can this army still podium? And what are some things that we think are going to be some stuff that custodian players can actually do here? Anyone, can they podium, I think?
I still think they can.
Yeah.
I don't think the army is like super dead. I think you'll see a switch to having to bring more like Sagittarium. The Dreadnoughts are still really good.
Yeah, so I think that, that's a good point. I think the Telemon is going to be included way more, which will be good. I think that, you know...
The Gladys is still cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all of the Contemptors, they're still very durable. They still have Eternal Penitent, right? They're still looking pretty good. Custodian players that really have their caudas down and really have the understanding of their timing down and the real fulcrum of that durability are going to be solid. I think I agree with you. I think that they still can win a tournament. It's just going to not be easy.
Yeah, they're going to have to work for it.
Yeah.
But I still think you'll see a squad of bikes. You know, like
there's still value there. The output's good. The speed is good. It's a versatile unit.
Absolutely,
right.
Like a unit of 5 now, because you're not. You know, the whole reason why you kept them in units of 3 was to keep the stratagems cheap on them, like a 1 CP here, right? But now that you don't have to worry about that, just take a super efficient 5-man bike squad. You're still gonna put out a ton of damage. Still, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and doing all that stuff, you know, next to another bike captain. So I think you'll still see some kind of bikes in there because you still need speed in 9th edition. Like you can't just walk everywhere. You need speed. You need to be in different areas. So deep striking. I just think they're gonna have to be smarter about it. Like you know, Custodians I think are still gonna be pretty good. Like deep strike 4 of them in the backfield. Spend 1 CP, split them off, do things. I don't know. Like,
I feel like I think it's easy to just completely write them off, and I agree that I think like they're going to be in the mix, and for some people who are saying like okay, like they're just dead and gone. I feel like the latest wave of codexes has kind of influenced our perception of like what it takes to have a winning book, because like the insane combos that you pull out has just been ridiculous lately, whereas like this tones them down considerably. Right. But when you compare them, when you like, okay, let's take out what we know about Tyranids, let's take out what we've seen out of Tau and where Harlequins are at now, you're like, okay, when I'm comparing it to the rest, you still have tools. A 5-man bike squad is still good. It's not just, okay, I'm just gonna go be here and be.
You can't just move to no matter what terrain. Who cares?
Like I don't care what you shoot at it. It's gonna live. Yeah. Like that's gone. Right. Okay. Well, that probably shouldn't have been a thing
in the first place. Yeah.
So now you just have a really good unit that you have to make good decisions with, and it still has the data sheets are still there. It still has the offensive output. Your defense has got toned down. Your strategy, you now have to be more on point with. So you still have tools. Right. Now you just have to be smarter. So it's like I see them, instead of being like this force that is just dominating RTTs and always being in the mix at every big event. Now it's probably like, okay, just the people who are really dedicated, they can be in the mix.
Right, and they're good. And then the other thing I think is this kind of makes me feel like we're going to start seeing some throwback looks to what Custodians were looking like beginning of 9th. We're going to see a couple shield units backed up by a couple Sagittarium, a few versatility speed units, maybe 1 or 2 dreadnoughts to help with impose in the middle and some fire in the background.
And not Trajan just sitting out there with a warden behind him saying, hey, you can't target him.
And actually the funny thing about this is before we had this discussion, I was kind of on writing the whole like rip, Custodes are dead, GG, goodbye. But talking about it a little bit, I don't think they're as dead as people think. Yeah. And I think that also what we're saying is the people that are really have a solid understanding of that army to the highest level are gonna still be able to pull a lot of value out of it. And I wonder how much of this happened too, because in the nature of the way books have been coming out, an interesting thing you brought up is a lot of people are flocking to these new powerful books. And especially a lot of people put something aside for the next shiny thing that is easy to play and win with, in the pursuit of rankings and all that stuff. So I wonder if a lot of this ripple effect from that is a lot of those people that that don't have a lot of that grasp around it, that are like, nah, this army is not, I got to try a little harder than I want to try, now, which is maybe a good thing,
Yeah. There's, at the end of the day, there's going to be those people that are going to podium anyway, no matter what they bring.
Right. Yep.
Right. That's why if you look at the top 100 in ITC over the years, it's the same people. Yeah. So, I'm sorry for that person that's 3,000th in the ITC, trying to win your RTTs with Custodes. But they're like a lot of people don't realize like they still have like the Caladius tanks, the Forge World units, and stuff like that. The beginning of 9th, Custodians had a high win rate with what they had previously. Right. Again, it's another one of those armies, just like Harlequins. They had a high win rate. Some codexes have come out since then to, stem it, but, they still have the core units, like what Logan's saying. Like,
right. Yeah, so I think that's solid. I think that actually I feel like Custodians still have some hope in there. And I think that our consensus, just to reiterate before we move on, is that they still have it in them. The high level Custodians players are still going to win with Custodes. So that's a good incentive for all the people out there. I think the message is just, keep learning your army, stick with it, get good at it, understand where the value is in those things. You still have your tools that can shut off rerolls where it matters. The units might have shifted, but at key moments, that's still immensely powerful. Yeah. There's still some play there.
Yep.
All right, AdMech stayed the same. I'm going to brush over that for the sake of time.
Yep.
Salamanders.
We already hit that.
We already hit that. Let's talk about, Chaos stayed the same. I don't think we really need to touch over them too much. We already talked about that. The big shuffle for them was Armor of Contempt. Mm-hmm. So let's move down here to Deathguard. Deathguard, add the following bullet point to the detachment abilities of Deathguard detachments. Blightlord Terminators and Deathshroud Terminators in Deathguard detachments gain OBSEC. Pretty big, I think. This is something that has been necessary for a long time, right? I think that Deathguard Terminators have always been, they had a moment in the sun and then they've just been underwhelming since then. They don't have a lot of offensive output. They have low mobility, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. And then when they were even on an objective, one witch runs up to it or Cabalite just tags it and now they don't have anything.
Yeah.
So it's like, they don't really have heroic interventions in any way to stop that, to influence that, or have a chance to react if that happens. They're just pretty stuck there. In conjunction with Armor of Contempt, I'm going to start with you, Logan, because you actually had a podium at a GT with Deathguard last ITC season. Does this affect them? Does this affect Deathguard? What do you think? In combination with Armor of Contempt, what are some of the big takeaways with Deathguard? Just what's the impression there?
So I like it, but like all of these point hikes, I mean, my favorite units basically got hit. I love Death Shrouds. The amount of mortal wounds they can put out is just insane, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of times we're seeing caps being put on how many mortal wounds a certain combo or stratagem can do. And they just didn't. And they had a huge weight of attacks, and every single one had the potential to do mortal wound. Like, it's just, they're nuts. I love them. But they all went up in points significantly. Poxwalkers went up in points. Just like all of my favorite units really got hit. And like the list I took to that GT, I think, is like 2,300 points or something. It's like way over the limit. And, Plague Burst Crawlers, the mortar, is now.
Ooh, that got hit hard. That's a big implication there.
So like that's worse. I was running 3 Relic Contemptor Dreadnoughts with Volkites. Those got more expensive. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot of knocks against them where it's like for me personally, I just look at the way I would want to run them, and I'm not feeling like that pull to go back to them. The only thing that I would be interested in trying would be some kind of Blight Hauler spam, just bring a lot of the big tough vehicles with Epidemius, like a Don Hewson list.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I'm seeing that I would want to try. I mean, despite, yes, they are 2+ armor saves with the ignoring minus, bringing down AP. Like that's really good. And they are OBSEC. That's awesome. It's just like the way that the points shake out. Deathguard were already feeling like they just didn't have that range or speed to reach out and touch someone.
Right.
And so that's why I was relying on Contemptors. Well, they got more expensive. My core of what I wanted to do to go out and grab objectives with Poxwalkers more expensive. The meat of my army, the Death Shroud's more expensive.
It's Indirect, significantly
yeah,
worse.
The Indirect is worse. So it's like everywhere I'm looking for how I want to play them, it's just worse.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think while this is good, the chapter-approved point changes, I think, are what's keeping Deathguard kind of out of it. So I haven't seen them doing much recently, and I don't think this is going to change it enough.
Yeah. I feel like they fall victim to one thing that I felt when I played Deathwing a lot. Deathguard feel a lot of the same things where you said it, Junior. Once the new mission pack came out, you have to have mobility. that mission pack completely took away the chill back in my deployment zone, stand on 2, score an 85 or whatever. Now you cannot do that. It is impossible. You have to have midboard. You have to be able to challenge for the middle of the table. And these armies that are 5-inch move armies, low obs head count armies that can be really like things like Drukhari, Harlequins, Craft Worlds can just run up and move block you. Cool, you went an inch, and then eventually just pocket you in. You're at a supreme disadvantage to where your opponent is dictating every engagement. And in that point in the new mission pack, you can't win that way.
And that's why I love taking Shrouds and those Contemptors, because I would always take the Deathguard secondary where I basically had to cover the whole board. And I think I only once scored a 14. Every other time was 15, because I always ended up spreading across the table, because the Shrouds, yeah, they're only moving 5 inches, but I frontlined them. They were tanking a lot of shots back then. The power creep hadn't gone insane. And they would survive, and whatever they touched, they would just destroy. But now there's a lot less of what I can take. I would in the game with like maybe 6 models, but I had them all around to actually touch things. And now you're going to take away like 15% of what I wanted to bring.
Right.
It's like now I don't have the resources. I need to spread out now. And now it's even more important.
Right. And then you're also lowering the impact of some of the things you do have out there too, which is huge. So yeah, I feel like that. So, I mean, I think the consensus is pretty obvious here that this is good. If you were playing Deathguard already, you're going to very much welcome this.
Yeah. I think it's better for Blight Lords because I think you're, a little cheaper. So
I don't think, and I'll ask you guys as well, do we podium here? Deathguard doesn't podium, I don't think.
No, they don't podium. They do better, obviously. And I think this change also was needed. I mean, the Thousand Suns Terminators had OddSec.
Every other Terminator has, yeah.
So
yeah,
it made no sense for them to not have it.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that this was one of those ones that we're kind of scratching our head. It's like, it's almost like too late now. Like, you know, like why now?
Undo the points, leave this stuff, and I think we'll see, like, okay, Deathguard might get back into the mix at some level.
Right. Okay, moving back down, Drukhari. I don't believe Drukhari had any change.
Nope.
Same with Necrons and Orcs.
Yep.
So let's move to the big ones, and I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on these guys. They are the most significant outside of Custodians, but I think that they're probably some of the most covered. So I definitely do want to talk about it, talk about the implication. We'll start with Harlequins. It's pretty straightforward, just points increases, right?
Yeah.
Well, and the Mirror Architect.
Right. So you were playing Harlequins. I believe you actually won a GT with them.
Well,
or a big RTT.
It was enough people dropped that they just dropped it to an RTT.
So it was supposed to be a GT. Anyways, you won an event with them. Let's talk about the changes. It's 4 bullets. Change the Mirror Architect pivotal role to read. In your command phase, select 1 Sadith core unit within 9 inches of this model. Until the start of your next command phase, each time an enemy unit is selected to shoot, when measuring the range to any model in that Sadith unit, it's considered to be an additional 6 inches away from the shooting model. Now, there was a weird interaction with this. The weird interaction, right, was... explain that for us, for everybody who might not have known what it was.
With Blaze of Light?
Yeah.
So how a lot of people were interpreting that as, okay, Blaze of Light says if you're outside of 12 inches, if the models are more than 12 inches apart, then you cannot, and like, to hit rolls of 1, 2, or 3 automatically fail.
Got it.
Regardless of any abilities or modifiers or anything. And so Mirror Architect in the book is worded that it's an aura and it affects everything. It's not core locked. It's it's core locked, and on top of that, it's pick one thing in the command phase. So
one core.
One core. So normally before this, you'd have your Shadow Seer in the middle of your 14 boats, and they would come along and be 7 inches away, and you're like, hey, so actually, we're going to stack these 2 rolls. You are now 13 inches away.
So what you would do is you would effectively shorten the range. So they're trying to get within that 12 to ignore that, but now they effectively have to reduce that to 6 to be able to hit you on any sort of meaningful ballistic skill.
Yeah.
Right. And it was just obviously a busted interaction that was just reacting really weird that pushed that durability over the top. This clarifies it and makes it to where you have to pick one. It can't be your heavy support tanks, and you can make that unit a little bit less desirable of a target.
Yeah, it only really affects. You can only affect two things now, which is the troops and the bikes.
The bikes, right? Because you can't do the transports don't fall in there either, right? Yeah, so you can't make any sort of boat, which is good. That's healthy.
You're still going to take the Shadow Seer because of the -1 to wound, but you're going to be more aggressive with him. You're going to put him up there with the troops, but you're not going to take the mirror ability. That's 25 points that you just saved.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I think I think Dark and Twilight for sure, because that's where the 10 mans like really shine more. Dark has the relic mask that shuts down OBSEC. So like, yeah, there's more for Shadow Seers to do other than this light broken interaction.
And I think that, I think we're going to start seeing, that was the appeal of light, was mainly this, right? Shadow Seer in there with Mirror Architect.
That was the big one.
Light. That was one of the bigs.
There was like, again,
Too
like
many.
10 layers of reasons why.
So one interaction there that's a little bit more, that makes more sense. Next bullet point, change the favor of Chegarak Warlord trait to read. Once per turn, when you make a melee hit roll or a melee wound roll or a saving throw for this Warlord, after making the roll, you can treat the result as an unmodified roll of a 6.
So this is big because you could do it with a range attack. So you just throw this on your Death Jester. So basically like 90-something% of the time, you were getting 6 hits with a strength 6, AP2, 2 damage weapon, right? And it was also shuriken, so it's just like okay.
Just runs like crazy, and then
And
Death
snipe.
Jesters ignore lookout.
And snipe, and there was a couple times where I would roll a natural 6. I roll 3 dice, roll a natural 6, and I'm like, okay, well this other one's gonna become a 6. I just got 9 hits, you know, for just cause, and now I'm gonna roll my wound rolls, and it was just so. The Death Jester with this Warlord trait and the triple exploding 6s pivotal roll was just in every list.
Yeah, just too much. It was an auto take, and we already talked about that.
Yeah.
This makes sense. One more weird interaction that kind of is ironed out there.
Yeah.
And then the last two things we have here is an increase by 15 points to the Star Weavers and an increase by 40 points to the Void Weavers. Massive increase on the Void Weavers. Obviously, they don't want you taking 9 of them. And actually, did it also change the unit size? Yeah, the unit size now is 1 to 3.
1 to 3.
So you can still bring 9 of them.
Yeah.
You just got to pay.
You got to pay a lot of points for it.
So yeah, that's a big deal. I think this.
I don't think we've
balances
ever seen a point increase percentage-wise that big. It's nearly 50%.
Yeah.
Have we seen anything?
I remember reading something like Grotz cuts. They went from like 2 points to 4 points. So it's like
Right.
Yeah, they're
big
5
double
right now.
difference,
Yeah.
but
Massive.
on something that's
as
like,
impactful to the game. That's
Yeah.
huge. That's necessary. I think that. I mean, I played 3 games against that list. It is insurmountable. It made you feel the same thing that you feel when you fought pre-nerf freebooters. All of the things that you're just like, it is insurmountable. You shouldn't feel that way.
And the Star Weaver is still like, 95 points is just,
That's
it's
like
expensive.
that's like the Raider change. It's like it puts it to the accurate points value.
Yeah, like compare it to something like a Razorback. A Razorback with a twin heavy bolter is like 110 points.
Yeah.
So it's cheaper.
And this flies and
It
has
flies.
-1 and
The gun is better.
Right.
It has an invulnerable save.
Yeah.
It's -1 to be hit. You can't re-roll hits. So it's like I've seen where people are saying, oh, this
Why?
like
Yeah.
It's like no, just compare it to other dedicated transports out there. You still have the best one.
Right. Yeah. It's still good. It's still solid. A little bit better than a Venom, right? And it has weapons and it's just good and all around. It flies, just super solid. I think Harlequins are still in a great spot. A lot of people are saying that it wasn't enough. What do we think on that?
I think it's opened up the space where it's like light isn't the obvious choice to win an event. I think now people who want to play Dark and Twilight, like it's just
There's incentive.
yeah.
And you're not giving up a ton of value.
And as a shooting player, I'm still wanting to try to make light work, and I still say like, okay, it's really dropped. But when I was seeing people saying they were taking the 2,000 point light list and giving their opponents a 500, 1,000 point handicap and still tabling them. So it's like, okay, something needed to change.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, I'm now taking like 315 points out of my current list to make it fit, it still feels like a competitive list. And I haven't really put it through its paces and extensive testing, but just by eyeballing it, I'm thinking, okay, I think this still has some legs. It's not going to be this oppressive force. Again, like Custodes, it's not going to be this oppressive force, but I still think it has the tools to mix it up and be competitive.
Right. What do you think?
Yeah, and I remember like reading some of the Decepticon stats with the 9 Void Reaver list on non-mirror matches they were like 38-1.
Yeah.
So I don't know who lost to that or who beat them. Good job there. But even the non-9 Void Weaver lists had like a 68% win rate at Adepticon. So I don't think they're completely dead.
No.
I still think you're going to see 4 to 6 Void Weavers in there.
And it should be decent, right? It should be like a normal amount of, and a healthy amount of fire support.
Yep.
Yeah. Instead of just ridiculous.
Yeah. You might see some bike squads finally.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I think, it'll open them up in the other sadists as well. They'll have some play there with the extra AP or the volume and stuff like that, right? Okay, Harlequins are still good. Obviously, it goes without saying it. They can still win events pretty easy. They're still very much relevant. And let's talk about Tau. Tau is a big one because their change to me was the most interesting. It is interesting to me to not see them catch a treatment similar to Custodians. Yeah. I'm not sure why that is, but their changes I feel like are very significant. We've got the Indirect nerf, and we've got a couple other bullet points here that are different. So, starting out with the first one. Change the second bullet point of the Montcalm ability to read. Each time a model in this unit makes a ranged attack that targets the closest eligible enemy unit within the range shown in the table below, reroll a wound roll of a 1.
So the AP's gone.
So they took out the second thing that said that increased their AP. This to me is massive for balancing, especially if you combo that with Armor of Contempt with this Power Armor Resurgence. The effect there is going to be a lot more than it feels like when you read it, I think. Yeah. I think the implication here is huge. I think some of the hot takes that I have, and you guys can agree or dispute what I'm thinking here, but I felt like one of the most oppressive things, especially in Farside Enclaves, with them was crisis suits with A, the amount of drones, but B, the ability to take flamers, plasma, and fusion. The volume on those D6 plus 2 flamers that had AP was insane. You're essentially handing your opponent somewhere around 30 wounds to make saves. That's incredible, especially when it applies to Overwatch as well. That's not even your big guns. Insanity. With the efficiency that Tau can get with the rerolls as well at that time and all that AP, my Deathwing got tabled. I was top table at a local event right when Tau was coming out, and I thought I was going to win this event. And I ran into Tau. I had already beaten Tau Sept once, and I ran into this Farsight Enclave list. Man, not even freebooters made me feel that sort of tabling. It was just like the amount of high quality shots and ability to not hide was close. It was like the same thing, but all of the efficiency and high quality firepower was insurmountable. It was crazy. So that really made me reevaluate my take to the whole approach to 40k after that, and I felt like that was savage. And then you saw it because Tau went on a tear through just Crisis went on a tear, and they're still on it. Just of how much damage they could get, how much damage they could put out, and how much they could move to impose that damage on you, because they're moving auto advancing 6 on units that move 12 that fly that have no penalty to hit you, extra AP, and all these rerolls. It was just crazy. Yeah, but they hit on a 4-up. Do they?
No.
So,
they hit on 3s.
Yeah.
So, full rerolls.
And even the stuff that's not within line of sight is, it was insanity. So I think this AP is going to have a huge implication, because especially as Marines come back into the fold, because now Indirect is dropped. These flamers and auto hit stuff that are in hand buckets of saves don't do anything to you. And you're going to rely, like most armies do, on your quality guns that are going to be a lot more low volume. I think that's a big deal. You're going to have efficiency on them, but it's not going to be to the likes that we saw before. And then also a lot of the stuff that's a little more durable is going to have they're going to have a harder time killing it. I think that's big. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think the AP change was huge for flamers. Also, some people were having great success. Quentin Johnson was having great success with Calm Under Pressure. And then I think he cycled through what his second custom step trait was. But Calm Under Pressure was just turning his burst cannons from strength 5 to strength 6. And that was a nice little break point. So they were typically strength 6, AP 1, could get it to AP 2 pretty easy. So you just had these strength 6, AP 1 or 2 guns just putting wherever he wanted them to and just lighting people up.
Yep.
And now that, at least half of that is gone.
Right.
And then you have to work to add AP to these guns that have a ton of volume, but no AP.
Right.
So now you have to spin a stratagem where you're dedicating, okay, all my shots for these 2 units are going into this 1 unit. And you have to work for it more rather than just okay, everyone just gets extra AP just cause.
Right. Same theme. Just in rewarding, making the right decision in a difficult setting rather than just being right.
Yeah, and they got an additional AP for 3 turns. Yeah, Space Marines get it for 1 turn.
Dude, yeah.
Or and it's assault, turns.
Even WA was only 2. You could weather it for 2 turns. Okay, that's not the majority of the game.
Yeah, and then here's the funny thing. GW was okay, orcs, we need to tone them down. Them hitting on 4s is too much with all that AP and all that many shots. And then Tau come out. And they're doing the same thing, but hitting on 3s instead. So it's you guys missed it again. Yeah, you guys messed up. But removing the AP is definitely going to help. But I still think Tal's going to be strong. And again, the change to indirect, they'll just change their weapons to the other ones that have more AP, and they'll just look at you, shoot you this time.
Interesting.
Because they're fast enough.
I want to talk about, because we've touched on it a little bit, is when you're a competitive player, you're going to go into 2 terrain sets. You're going to go into FLG's player place terrain in the ITC, or you're going to be playing into the GW terrain. Mm-hmm. Now, last season we didn't see too much of GW terrain. You pretty much exclusively saw GW terrain if you were going to go to any of the U.S. Open events. Yeah. Now I'm starting to see it, and it's starting to be imposed into more of the events otherwise. Motor City Mayhem is going to have it. Several other events that are non-FLG are actually pulling that into the system. So we're starting to see more of these outlier GW heavy terrain board setups. How does this impact Tau, and what do you guys think as far as that goes into an army like this? Because we talked about orcs, and a lot of the things is you weren't able to hide as much, but in these more heavy terrain boards with a lot of abundance of light cover, do you still think that these Tau shooty lists are going to be as impactful, or do you think that terrain set helps? Or which terrain set do you think is better, and how do you think that matters as far as Tau goes?
Yeah, I think, against both, the GW terrain sets are huge. There's no windows, so if you do hide in them, you're not being seen. The player placed, you can castle up and layer the terrain so that it's really hard to see you. So when you think about that conceptually, you're like, okay, what are my ways to interact with that? Well, one is indirect fire. Well, that's a lot harder to do now. So what's my other way? How about super high mobility? It's like, okay, well, what are my platforms to do that? Well, with Tau, it's crisis. Mm-hmm. And so you have the answer is already there, and it's already really good. These crisis suits, base 10 movement, a cold star can give them an auto advance, so they're going 18. You can spin a strat for another one to go auto 16. So you have the movement, and then it's well, if I have to get that close, then I'm probably going to be charged. Well, Tau have a strike and fade strat, so they can shoot you and then move back 6. And then if you do go for a charge, they have an ability to make you -2 to charge. So it's they have everything that you would want them to have, that you would want a shooting unit to have, they have access to it.
Right.
So it's in either of those terrain sets, there are going to be angles for you to get if you have the mobility to get them. Because with player placed, you're typically you're not going to be able to shield yourself from every single conceivable angle. You have gaps that you have to leave, right. And you're typically going to be okay, I want to be unable to be targeted in this general direction.
Right.
But if they go to the flanks, they're probably going to get, with true line of sight, get a beat on something. But the GW terrain, those are massive blocks that you have to get into, but there's big open spaces on the side. So if you can, again, go down the flanks with enough speed, you should be able to draw a line of sight to something. So since Indirect is kind of, really limited, well, the next thing you're looking at is speed, and Montcog kept the bullet point for you remain stationary even though you advance. So there's really no penalty to going that fast and getting the line of sight you want.
Right. It just makes me curious because you're going to have to commit up into there, and you're going to see Blood Angels coming back in the fold. You're going to see stuff like that. Now Tau, especially on the GW terrain, is going to have to be making aggressive movement to get the line of sight they want. And I'm like wondering how we're going to see that play out, and I wonder how Tau do in that sort of setup there. I'm curious how that affects us.
Yeah, it's going to be, and that's going to be the thing is seeing players return to Blood Angels and say, okay, now it feels like it's more of a game, right? Instead of Tau just like dropping 10 or 15 or even 20 crisis suits right in your face and saying, well, I have the AP, I have everything that I want. I'm just going to destroy you in a couple turns. Now it's, all right, I'm losing some layers of efficiency. You've gained some. Now we're on slightly more even footing. Like, okay, now there's interesting tactical decisions to be made.
Right. I love that. It's so good. That's the fruit of the game right there. Okay. Next bullet point, we're changing the first bullet point of the devastating counterstrike Farsight Enclave's tenant to read. Each time a model with this tenant makes a ranged attack that targets a unit within 9 inches, the target is treating to have as having a marker light token. What's the big implication here?
So huge. So Farsight Enclave, they used to be able to drop in within 12 inches, so 10, 11 inches. And then they get +1 a hit.
That's right. They were within 12. They got the marker light, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So now they have to drop outside of 9, and they don't get the +1 a hit anymore.
Got it.
So stratagems like drop zone clear to become less effective when you're not,
because you're on your 4s.
You're on your 4s.
Yep.
You're not re-rolling everything on, 3s.
Huge. Yeah, because the free marker light was the big draw to Farsight, which made it so good in the beginning of Tau, where it was like everyone was like, how do I take these marker lights? And people were like, all right, this army's nothing if I just blast these marker lights away. They don't need it. They just had it. And then you could have set re-rolls and stuff too. Yeah, this is big.
So losing a quarter of your marker light range, that, it's only 3 inches, but it, like with the drop zone clear, that's important.
It's huge. And also this plays a little bit more into the last thing I talked about. This goes right into that, where we're going to see some really melee oriented armies with really high level saves. And now you're going to have to get even closer to that army to want that. So now we're talking about a dangerous gambit to where the trade-off could have some serious tactical implications there. I'm curious, this is a huge effect on Farsight.
Yeah, and now they're going to have to take marker light drones if they want to come up around the side to shoot. I don't know, can they still advance and do marker lights with their drones?
No,
right?
No.
So that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
You might have like other vehicles like Tetras that have marker lights.
Or people,
But you're going to have to dedicate other things, and you're just not going to have 15 shield drones.
Yeah.
Keeping your stupid suits alive.
Right. Dude.
That's another thing. I think, we can go through the rest of the stuff and seeing what we thought about what changes should have been made.
Right. Removing the core from broadsides, that's a big one for you because you were running a real railgun heavy broadside list for a minute. And you had some solid success with that list. It was pretty insane.
That hurts.
Right. So let's talk about, for the people that don't play Tau very much or run into this, or maybe haven't seen broadsides, what are you tangibly losing by losing core?
I'm losing the ability to mitigate the hit penalties because I was getting reroll 1s for everything from Shadow Sun.
Got it.
Her 12-inch, her 6-inch becomes 9, becomes 12.
Okay.
Through a couple of abilities. So she was, wherever my broadsides were, they were rerolling 1s. She was picking a hammerhead squad to reroll all their hits. So that was great. They're infantry, so I put them in defensible cover. I put it on the lead one. Being core was like, okay, they are now, Overwatch is hitting on 5s and 6s. Shadow Sun is giving them full rerolls. and Ethereal was saying, hey, we're going to make you, your core. So I'm going to make you -1 to hit, and I'm going to give you a 5-up Feel No Pain.
Oh, so they lose all of the Ethereal can't affect them at all.
Yeah, the Ethereals affect core. So it's like I went from having this big, beefy unit that was like leading my charge, because I'm very aggressive with my 9 broadsides. I'm pushing them up the field, and I have this big, unit that's really tanky. 5 shield drones, -1 to hit, 5-up, Feel No Pain, sitting in defensible terrain with full rerolls. It's like that's hard to deal with.
Right.
And they had a 2-up save too, right?
And a 2-up save.
And 8 wounds.
Yes. So like and.
Yeah.
So there's just all these layers, and then on top of that, like Long Strike, it has an ability to pick a hammerhead or a core unit to count as having a marker light against all of its targets. So in theory, I could just pick this broadside unit, and it could split attacks. It has total of 6 guns against 6 different targets, and I get +1 to hit against all of them. So it's like a free 6 marker lights.
Wow.
So, and that's huge for when they're hiding stuff out of line of sight. I say, okay, Long Strike is going to give these people +1 to hit. Shadow Sun is going to give these people full rerolls to hit, and we're just going to dump shots. And so there was like no way to really hide from them. And when you take core away, okay, now I put velocity trackers on all of them, so I'm getting +1 hit against fly, which is nice. But then with the changes to indirect fire, it's like, okay, now I've taken 2 massive steps down from where they were. So losing core is just for me, that's why I've completely stripped my broadsides of smart missile systems. It's just gone to plasma.
Yeah, makes more sense. Okay, so big hit on them. A lot of efficiency lost there. They're going to be more of a support unit, probably like there was intended to be, instead of the crux of the list.
Yeah, they were my Vanguard, which isn't probably what they should be thematically.
Before they used to just hang out on the back.
Right.
I'm going to shoot from back here, be safe.
Right.
I would push them up against a Gene Stealer Cold opponent. I'm just like pushing them up the field, and they can't do anything about it.
Right.
It's like that's not probably what they wanted the game to look like.
So the last bullet point here is a big one, I think, because I think I felt this one a lot in certain key scenarios. Add the following to the repulsor impact field and photon grenade stratagem. The charge roll modifier incurred by the stratagem is not cumulative with any other negative modifier to a charge roll. There were scenarios where, I remember the first time it happened to me, like you don't think about it, but dude flies his crisis up, they're chilling in some dense terrain, some difficult ground. You're like, all right, you set up a charge, you get up there, you're like, all right, I'm at 5, I'm -2. Repulsor impact field, now I'm -4 when I'm 5 inches away. Now it's like I'm just trying to YOLO at a deep strike. You can just net massive amounts of negative modifiers onto charges. That's the likes of, you haven't seen anything like that. Not even Tanglefoot Grenade, unless you roll really hot, is like that. So, and it's completely reactionary to where Tanglefoot is like, you have to like, hey man, like, that's huge, I think. You're only going to get the -2. Only going to get -2 ever to charge the crisis units or a suit unit. That's a big one. It's very straightforward. I just think that layer of defense was pretty absurd. Or you'll see Craft Worlds will try to drop in from the warp some Scorpions I tried one time, and it's like, dude, -2. And either coming out of deep strike, essentially, you just can't charge them. It's just like, man, that's crazy. So
it's good, I think, but kind of what we alluded to earlier, I feel like a big thing is what we don't see on here. And the biggest offenders that were just really winning event after event after event for Tau were crisis units. And all the events I've played so far, I haven't used any. Mm-hmm. So I was really hoping to like dodge these nerfs, but I got hit twice hard. So now I'm actually putting crisis in because they weren't affected. No points adjustments, nothing into their rules, no limits on drones, on the stim injector, which is still an insane 10-point upgrade.
I don't even want to talk about that thing. It's so.
I'm just gonna give a 4 up feeling pain.
The fact that you could put like 20 wounds on something and know that one model is gonna just cut that in half.
Yeah.
On average.
Or you spike and you do like no damage.
You do no damage. Like that. Think about that. That's like a unit that's putting that type of damage on something. That's an all-in play. Like you're talking like a 300-point unit of Inceptors.
Yeah.
With everything getting through there. Like you're like 25 wounds on something. That's a lot. Like once you get through 10 drones, your 10 remaining wounds, that thing tanks 5, maybe 6 of them, and then you maybe kill a suit.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I've had that happen.
We all have, and it hurts.
and they haven't touched it. So Crisis are still
right.
The shining stars.
I think it's good. I think that what we do see here, like I said, on paper, some of this stuff doesn't seem as bad or as much as it could, but there is going to be a real tangible effect in game, I think. I think into the Tau matchup, as we started to see it, there is a game there. Like you can play a game, and it's not an insurmountable army, I don't think. It's going to be better than you, to where you're playing a little bit as an underdog there. But I think these changes, you will actually feel it heavily. And I also think that I'm very interested to see what Marines can do into some of this with some serious AP degradation on them and some net gains in Marines. There's going to be an interesting, unstoppable force and movable object dynamic there. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm not committing to one yet, but I'm very curious to see what high-level Marine players can impose, because there is a fulcrum there where I think that some things like, I want to see your Blood Angels in a Tau. I think there's a real good, I think that's going to wreck. I want to see some of the people that were pulling some other high-level Space Marine builds into these that are now in a whole different playing field. I'm curious to see that. I think Tau are fine. Tau are still going to be very strong.
Yeah.
I think we're still going to see them win plenty of events. I also think it's coming as we transition into Tyranids, which it's good to have an army that is going to have the output to deal with that potentially. But I'm also curious to see how the stuff we have right now does into that. I think we're in an interesting point in that game.
Yeah. And you kind of brought this up about like the orcs, the shooting that they could do. A big draw to them were the rockets, strength 8, AP 2, 3 damage, which went to AP 3 for 2 turns. And Tau, their plasma guns, strength 8, AP 4, 3 damage at 30-inch range. It's just like, okay, that's nuts. And then, yes, Tyranids with the Maleceptor can like bring that strength down. So it's like, that's why personally I'm not going all in to Crisis. They kind of top out at strength 8, unless you take a custom trait. But then, well, I still have rail weapons that are strength 9 or strength 14. So it's like they still have these tools. So even if you do lower the strength, okay, I'm still going to be wounding you on, 2s or 3s, unless you're a Leviathan, then it's only 4s. But I think like what you're saying, they do have the tools, and we saw how oppressive orcs could be with a huge volume of strength 8, 3 damage shots with good AP, and Tau still have that.
Yeah, and they're going to be in a good position there. I think that now we're starting to rein in some of the stuff that was rampant with them. I think that you're going to see high-level players start to be able to manage and overcome the Tau matchup, and I'm excited for that, but I do still think that I like that Tau retains some strength. I think that's important.
I feel like they didn't go too ham-fisted onto them, and the matchup between them and Marines has gone from totally lopsided, I think, to something way more reasonable.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be reasonable there. The Custodian one's going to be largely similar, right? Unless we're talking about Hammerheads. We're talking about Harlequins are still going to have a game there, right? I think that we're looking at a pretty decent round out for those. And then I think that Tau kind of get reined into what they're supposed to be. I also, like I said, it incentivizes the unit diversity in the army instead of just, I'm going to take the best data sheet as many times as physically possible to win. We're going to see the necessity for some hammerhead railguns, maybe some broadsides, a core of crisis suits, some marker lights. You're going to see a diverse army that is going to be one on skill, and I think that that's a healthy thing. I'm excited for that.
I think there's going to be some players who are going to try 20 plus crisis suits.
Yeah.
And I think it will do well to a certain point, but I do think at the big events, at the highest levels, you're going to run into people who can play around that, because I think they've lost enough efficiencies and other books have gained enough to where I don't think you can just roll up to a table with that and just expect to roll over people.
No, especially as we get into, and once again, I think that list is going to suffer into certain terrain sets. I think that list will do better on player-placed ITC terrain than it will on GW terrain. And I think that if with the US Open happening and some of these other things where you can't bank on one terrain set, it's going to be one more notch against a complete skew army like that, because it's like, well, now you avoid some of these events and I'm going to go to that event and blah, blah, blah. Because I think that, dude, you got to get up into you have to aggressively position in order to get those volumes of shots, which is going to put you on a timer because you're going to get hit and tagged, and it's going to, it's going to backfire on you. So I'm curious to see how this all pans out. I'm actually pretty excited for the state of the game right now. I want to see kind of how it all shakes out. So tons of material to cover. I love it. We've covered a lot of stuff as far as this goes, and what we've our impressions on everything. I think I want to give the last two things I want to ask you guys as we start to wrap this thing up is starting with you, Junior. Closing thoughts on the data slate and what it means for 40K as we know it right now. And I want to know what unit you're most excited about.
Well, I'll start with the unit. It's Vanguard.
Yeah.
I think they're going to do a lot of work in the coming meta. So, yeah, I'm super excited to put them back on the table. 26 of them, I don't know, something crazy. But I think the meta needed to change. A lot of people were not going to events because, why would they show up if they're just gonna
get tabled
by Harlequins or get a shot off the table with Tau?
I went to a GT that became an RTT because of that.
Yeah, because a lot of people didn't want to play that stuff. So I think these changes, people are gonna go out there. They're gonna bring these new lists. They're gonna try them out against this new meta, and I think that's very healthy. So you'll see a lot more events with more people again. Because even here we used to have 3 to 4 RTTs a month just in the San Diego area. Now we have like 1 or 2, and then even then it's do 24 people show up. Like I was running an RTT at Ease. I had 36 people at one RTT one time. So but we don't see that level right now because people don't want to play this stuff. Yeah. But I think this new data slate is going to get people out there playing and trying new things. So I'm super excited. And then plus, you don't want to see a 98% win rate Harlequin army.
No, you want to show up with a chance to compete.
Yeah, that's horrible. People were, throwing their hands up when Drukhari had a 68% win rate, and they were the only army doing it at the time. Yeah. Right now you have 3 armies.
It's like
doing that. One of them at like higher than 70%. Right. And it's just ridiculous. Yeah. So I'm glad some of these armies have been toned down a little bit. I still think the Tau drone situation is still oppressive. Yeah. I don't think my one change to Tau would have been if they have more drones than suits, then the unit's toughness 4, just like every other army. I don't know why they get to ignore that, or morale. Right. Yeah. If I'm going to dedicate 2,000 points to kill 5, shield drones, I wanted to count towards something, as opposed to I ignore everything. So good job killing my 5 drones. Now I still have the rest of my army to kill you with. Right. I'm excited. So my Blood Angels, they're looking to come out.
Kick the dust off. I'm excited. Right on. And I look forward to seeing that. Heck yeah. Cool. Junior, that's what's up. Logan, closing thoughts, same questions to you. What unit are you most excited for, or faction as well? Obviously Blood Angels for you, Junior. And then what does this data slate, what do you think it means for the meta and the game as we know it?
Yeah, I think this was a super important data slate. I feel like we were coming to this weird kind of fever pitch of people just being very frustrated, and just seeing crazy domination from just a handful of books. So I think this was super important. I didn't see anything like the Armor of Contempt coming, so I'm like, hey, this is great. You've breathed life into a huge, player base, because everyone owns Marines.
Right.
I have a huge, just like shoebox after shoebox after shoebox filled with Marine stuff that are gathering dust, and it's just like, okay, there's actually something to look at here. This data slate I feel like was super important. I feel like even though there are some things that we probably would have changed about it, I think on the whole, it looks great. I think they've addressed a lot of the things, except for like maybe they could have gone a little farther with Crisis. Maybe they went a little too far against Custodes. So maybe some small things like that. But on the whole, I think they've done a lot to make the game's going to look different.
Better,
And personally, I would love to see Centurions on the table. I'm going a unit that I haven't really had a whole lot of practice with is Crisis Suits, and I'm starting to play with those now. But what I'm personally way more interested to see is, okay, do Centurions like make a comeback? 4 wounds, toughness 5, 2 up armor. There's still some things you can do with them. They still get affected by the apothecaries, and so there's still cool interactions there. They don't have core, but they have a lot of other things going for them. White Scars can give them really cool buffs to advancing and charging. Like there's just stuff to do with them.
Black Templar.
Yeah, Black Templars can make a guy like give him 5 wounds, and like you can dump all kinds of stats on him, and then if he dies, you just revive him. So yeah, it's really cool.
Right. And that's another one too. I think that it's cool. I think we're going to see a lot of faction diversity, which is something we need. And I think overall, this was the right time. We needed it. And I think the 40K community as a whole is excited. Mm-hmm. As always, guys, appreciate you tuning in. We're going to try to do this a little bit more weekly and keep the content coming out for you guys as far as keeping you informed and just letting you know what we're doing on the competitive side of the game of Warhammer 40K. As always, if you like what you saw, please press the like button, subscribe, and you'll get notifications of our weekly content. And please put in the comments of any of the stuff that you want to see coming up, or any of the content that you'd like us to cover, because we're always looking for new topics and things that you guys as a fan base want to hear. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.